everyone, welcome back to A+ Maths. I hope you've been enjoying the videos that I've been doing and they're helping you get better at maths and improve your skills. Today I'd like to continue on from our functions and I'd like to graph absolute values. Hopefully you've watched my other videos or you already know how to graph your basic curves because we need to know how to do that to do the absolute values. Let's start by talking about what is an absolute value. So the absolute value of a number is its magnitude, its size, and it's a number that tells us the distance something is from zero. Because we're talking about a distance, the absolute value will always be positive. Let's take a look at what I mean. You can always tell an absolute value because it's got two vertical lines like this. This is read as the absolute value of -3. Now the absolute value of -3 is going to equal 3 because it's a distance from 0. If I'm trying to find the absolute value of -2 plus 4, you work out what's inside the brackets first, or inside the absolute values, and you get 2. So the absolute value of 2 is 2. If we have the absolute value of 5 minus 6, so that's going to be the absolute value of -1, which is 1. 3 lots of the absolute value of -2 minus 9 equals 3 lots of the absolute value of -11. But the absolute value of -11 is 11, so that's 3 times 11, which is 33. So that gives us an idea of what we're doing with absolute values. Now let's actually have a look at the graphs and how we actually know what's going on. Let's take a look at our first graph. Let's make it y equals 2x plus 1. Y equals 2x plus 1 is going to be a straight line going through +1 on the y-axis. So it'll look something like this. Now, if I want to draw y equals the absolute value of 2x plus 1, what's that actually going to do? Remember that the absolute value makes everything positive. So the positive part of my graph will stay the same. You can just go over that. And then the negative part, the bit that's below the x-axis, becomes positive. So whatever's down there is just going to become positive. So you draw basically the reflection about the line y equals 0. So the red graph ends up being the absolute value of 2x plus 1. Let's have a look at a different one. What if we have y equals 2x squared minus 6? You should remember that x squared is a parabola. The 2 makes it steeper and the whole graph goes down 2. So we've got this graph. Great. Now what if we actually want to find the absolute value of the same graph? Well, the absolute value, the positive parts stay the same and the minus bit bounces up. And so we're left with the green graph. How is that so far? Pretty good? Let's have a look at a different one. Y equals 3 over x minus 2. This one's a hyperbola because it's got an x on the denominator. And we know that the whole graph is moved to the right 2. Good. So this is our graph for y equals 3 over x minus 2. Remember, if you can't do this graph, that's not because you're having problems with absolute values. That's because you don't know graphs. Go back and watch the last video on exponentials and hyperbolas and parabolas if you don't know. We now want to graph the absolute value of this graph. So remember, what does that do? Whatever's negative, whatever's below the x-axis is going to bounce up to the plus. So the positive part stays the same and the bit underneath the x-axis bounces up. And the red part is going to be what's left. And that's our absolute value graph. How are they? They're not too bad, are they? Let's take a look at a graph like this. A bit of a polynomial. Y equals x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 1. Some of you may know how to factorize that and graph it. That's okay. I'm going to tell you that this graph looks like that. It's a wiggly graph. They're nice looking graphs. And I now want to draw the absolute value of this graph. The absolute value of it. It doesn't actually matter what the graph is inside. You know what it looks like because I've already drawn it. And what do we know about an absolute value? We know that an absolute value makes everything positive. So whatever's below the x-axis is going to bounce up. So we're left with a graph that looks like this. The positive bits stay the same and the negative bits, the bits below the x-axis, bounce up. Be careful because the bits on the x-axis, the points where it cuts the x-axis will be a little point. They will not be round. Be careful of that. What if we have a graph where some of the graph is not inside the absolute value? So here we have y equals the absolute value of x minus 1. Now we're going to do the same way that we've done all our graphs. So here we have two things going on. We've got y equals the absolute value of x, which is that graph. And then that graph goes down 1. So we first have to draw y equals the absolute value of x. And how do we do that? We start with y equals x. Then we want to draw y equals the absolute value of x by bouncing everything under the x-axis up to the top. So this is what y equals x looks like. Y equals x is going to be a straight line going through the origin. Now we want to draw y equals the absolute value of x. And what's that going to look like? Well, that's going to make everything below the x-axis bounce up. So that's going to look like that V, the red graph. Now we want that whole graph to go down 1. So we move the whole graph down 1. Don't get confused and think, oh, but you said that the absolute value can never be negative. The absolute value part, the absolute value of x, can never be negative. So now my whole graph has gone down 1. So that bit could be negative. Let's try one more. Y equals 3, the absolute value of x minus 2, plus 1. So what are we going to do first? The first thing we want to do is to think about our normal graph, which is y equals x minus 2. Then we're going to do the absolute value of y equals x minus 2, which is going to bounce everything up from the bottom. Then we're going to put the 3 out the front, and what does that do? It just makes everything steeper. And then we do our plus 1, which makes whatever graph we've got, and we're going to put it all up 1. So now we want to draw it, and we're going to draw it bit by bit. We're going to follow each step. So we draw y equals x minus 2 first. You should all know that that's a straight line going through minus 2. Then we want to do the absolute value. And the absolute value means that whatever's below the x-axis is going to come up to the top. So you're going to get that V shape. Now we need to do the 3 out the front, and that's going to make everything steeper. Just remember, you've got both sides to make steeper. And then we're going to move the whole graph up 1. And then you can write out your working, and you're left with the graph in blue. That brings us to the end of absolute values. That was a pretty quick video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope now you understand how to do absolute values. Just remember that if you had trouble with any of the graphs themselves, go back and have a look at one of the other videos that I've made so that you can then do absolute value graphs. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tick the notification bell. Bye.